Welcome to World Economic Forum 2026. I have the person who drives World Economic Forum and plays a major role in global economy, President and CEO of World Economic Forum, Mr. Borge. Borge, thank you so much for joining us at Times Network, and congratulations. You have pulled off a coup this year with the biggest ever, I think, delegation, 65 heads of state, more than 1,500 business leaders participating, large Indian presence, and I think the biggest ever US delegation. So congratulations on that. But I hope you are able to actually create a spirit for dialogue. I mean, that's the theme, a spirit of dialogue. I hope you are able to create that conducive environment.
I hope so too. And I would say that looking at the fragmented world that we are seeing, the meeting happening against the most complex geopolitical backdrop since 1945, the importance of dialogue is really there. But now we will also need to have the leaders sitting down and trying to make progress in important areas.
Yeah, you use the word fragmented world. You know, in some cases between large economic blocks, it's almost like a fault line and it's becoming deeper. Are you concerned about that? If I give example of, let's say, what's happening between China and US, or now what's happening between Europe and US pertaining to issue of Greenland, what's happening between India and US, are you concerned?
I think everyone are concerned in the sense that this is a different way of interacting and collaborating than in the past. But there are also nuances to this. You know, we started last year with big confrontations between US and China on the trade side. That came together, and both of them saw that they were too intertwined to really decouple. So the US is also relying on rare earth from China. They're also relying on a lot of things that are manufactured in China. And then China is also relying on the American semiconductors and advanced chips. So last year, we were expecting a slowing of the growth due to the tariffs. I think some was there.
It was not as bad as
feared. No. So because the tariffs were not so as high as expected. And then on top of this, you had so much investments in the new future technologies and AI that was also creating growth, a lot of growth.
Right. But are you concerned, Borge, about, I mean, for the lack of a better word, weaponization of trade or weaponization of tariff between countries? Are you concerned about that? Because it's in direct conflict with the spirit of globalization.
So, since the start of the 1990s, we have had this globalization for 30 years. It doubled the global GDP. The extreme poverty in the world went from 40% to 10%. So it gave its benefits. But they also had challenges related to it. For example, many blue-collar workers in already industrialized countries and middle class got competition from emerging economies they didn't have before. You have to look at it in a broader historic context. Trade has always been fluctuating. We have been through a period of a lot of trade and opening of borders. Now we're in a different situation where also post-COVID, countries are not only thinking about just in time, but also just in case, so they're strengthening their supply chains. And then you have on top of it this friendshoring, that some countries only want to then trade basically with friends, what they define as friends. But that's also very complicated because, as I said, with US and China, they're already so interlinked. I think the same with the US and India are very interlinked. But that process of negotiations are still going on. And I thought by Davos that would have been solved. But let's see.
Yeah, but do you think it'll be resolved anytime soon? Because everybody was hoping that it will be resolved before Davos.
Yeah, I would have said that also a few months ago. So I don't know what really takes that much time, but I think India and US are a win-win situation. So I'm pretty sure that Prime Minister Modi and President Trump will find a way. But, it takes a little bit of
flexibility
time and time, obviously.
Right. Sir, also, I mean, you have one of the largest, I would say, melting pot when it comes to global corporates. Today, one of the challenges that any large global corporate is facing is they are continuously getting dragged into geoeconomics and geopolitics, and they have to shift their, business strategy. They have to shift their supply lines. I mean, if you look at the count of number of corporates who have exited from China, and vice versa, it's really a concern. So, I mean, what is your view on that as World Economic Forum?
So, we can look at it as glass half full or half empty.
Empty.
We were expecting much more of a slowing of the global growth than we have seen. This year we expect a little bit more than 3%. It's not like trend growth closer to 4% we had for decades, but with all the geopolitical turmoil, it's not bad. Trade used to be the engine of growth, and trade grew twice as much as the global growth. That, I think, is not happening in the years to come. But what we're seeing now, that trade is still growing. It's growing around 3%. So it's not stopping. So we are trading more with each other, we respect, this year than we did last year. So that is important to remind ourselves about. And secondly, on top of this, we have 1.5 trillion US dollars being invested in AI last year. This will continue also this year. So a year ago, I would have been worried that we could see a decade of slow growth like in the 1970s. If there's no major wars and escalations with the new technologies, we could possibly also, if you want to look at the bright side of life, and that's also something we need to do, we can see decades of high growth because of the investments in the new technologies, increased productivity and all this. So I'm torn, but moving a bit more to the bullish side than the bearish side on the global economy.
Right. Let's talk about the brighter side, because you mentioned tech. How countries like India, with large population, fastest growing economy, but largest population also, can benefit from the AI revolution that's taking place? Because what is happening is, unfortunately, the debate is always about the impact that AI will have on jobs, and how many people will lose their jobs, or what kind of professions will go out of fashion. But I'm sure there will be a lot of positives also. What is your view on that?
So we have seen with technological changes in the past that is a period of changes. And it can be structural changes that are quite deep. And people can also lose their job, but hopefully there will then be created jobs higher up in the value chain that can pay better salaries in the future. When the T4, the cars came, hundreds of thousands of drivers, taxi drivers of horses lost their job, and because the cars went much faster, half of them could not keep their job and become a taxi driver in the car. But then they found other jobs higher up in the value chain that paid them better. So when we see technological changes, so far from the first industrial revolution until the fourth, and now I think we're entering the fifth industrial revolution, have always created short-term, medium-term challenges, but then we have grown more prosperous. Look at the world today. We live longer, we're healthier, and the world is much more prosperous now than just a few decades ago.
Right. Do you think the fifth industrial revolution will be actually led by probably countries like India, and a lot of emerging economies will actually end up leading the fifth industrial revolution?
I do think that countries that are emerging economies today can do really well, provided that they do have the right people, the right competence, introduce the right structural changes, economic reforms. So India, I'm quite optimistic. We also have seen now reforms that we thought were coming, but they have accelerated. And I think it's also related to the impasse with the US on the tariffs. India has a critical mass of people, capital to continue to grow. So I would be more worried with smaller economies that are more developing economies, because with the new technologies you cannot exclude that short term the winner takes it all. And this is what we saw in the platform economy. So you will need to make sure that the jobs that are not there anymore can be replaced with better jobs, paying better too.
Right. I want to once again come back to the theme of this year's summit, a spirit of dialogue. What we have seen is increasingly the belief somewhere is about, might is always right. We saw what happened in Venezuela, and now the way situation is evolving on Greenland. I'm not talking about a particular country, but this belief that, you need to be strong, and if you're strong, you can do what works for you. That is again in conflict with the spirit of global good. What is your take on that?
So we definitely are in a new context than we were after the Cold War, where there was like a win-win perspective. What is good for you is good for me, and vice versa. Now there is more competition. We were also expecting this period to be a more multipolar period, where more countries came in and took the lead. But I'm now reflecting on the fact that there are maybe a situation that is in parallel, that you establish these interest spheres. The big nations of the world create interest spheres, and they want then countries to then be in their sphere and also be then complying with their interest. And this is something else than multipolarity. So I think we're entering a very consequential period on how the global governance will look like. Hopefully we're not entering into a situation where the law of the jungle will come back. I hope we'll find ways of working together with established rules, a bit different than in the past, but still where we continue to trade with each other, where we still also are able to deal with common challenges. Like, look, if there's a new pandemic, that cannot be dealt with one country alone. This is global.
Right. One last question. If you want, if Davos 2026 were to be remembered for one concrete outcome, what would that be?
That we built more trust between nations, and companies also, and private sector could underpin the development that could come out of more collaboration. That would be my wish.
Well, on that note, thank you so much, Borge, for giving us time, and all the best for Davos. Thank you. Thank you.